Good morning, good afternoon,
good evening.
Whatever time of day you're listening to this. I just realised that I always start the podcast with the same hi, hello, and welcome back to another episode of the CeMAP Study Podcast, and I got all defensive about it for a second, so I thought I'd switch it up, and apparently it doesn't work. But welcome back to another episode of the CeMAP Study Podcast, where every single week, sometimes every single week, not always, me and Maria get together and we help you guys get you through your CeMAP studies without wishing that you had just regretted all of your life decisions.
Yeah.
So this week's episode is going to focus on CeMAP 1, so it's a revamp of the CeMAP 1 material, and we are going to be honing in on topic 5 of the textbook.
Ooh.
It is a boring one, this one.
You say that about all of them.
I know, but this one, I just feel like this one is especially boring. There's no fire that lights inside me when I talk about this topic, whereas the other ones, talk to me about inheritance tax, baby, and I'm yours, but state benefits and state pension, it's just,
okay.
it's a bit dull, but we need it. So we're not going to fart about with this episode. Maria, if you wouldn't mind.
Cue intro music.
So in this topic, first of all, what I find quite common with my students that feedback is they don't get any questions on state benefits in their exam. And I'm not saying that you should tune out now, because actually there are two things that can crop up. They don't crop up for everybody, but they can crop up, and we'll cross, I guess, that bridge when we get to them. But the basis of this topic really is to talk about what state benefits are. And I'm hoping most people that listen to this are going to have an idea of it. But Maria, I didn't prepare for this, but you try and give me a summary.
Oh, Jesus. Was it the Labour government that introduced the care state, the state of care, or whatever the fuck it is that the Tory party like to bludgeon us with? We provide for people that can't provide for themselves. So basically, if you are unemployed, you get some level of financial support and employment support. If you are of the age of retirement, you get a state pension, which is bullshit because they keep fucking with it. If you are long-term sick or on disability, you can also get some financial support from the state or government. That's it. That's all I've got.
No, that's a pretty good overview in fairness.
Cool.
There's a couple of there's something that you mentioned which I think is really interesting, because I can see when I teach this to people sometimes on the masterclass, because obviously I can see people's faces.
Yeah.
I see them go, oh. And I always start by saying, look, benefits aren't just for people who are fucking lazy. And that's
which is the common misconception.
Drilled into us by usually the Sun newspaper, or the Daily, if that is
Daily
still
Fail.
going. The Daily Fail. People need financial support for a lot of different reasons, and actually people who are in full-time work can still claim benefits.
Yeah, you get child benefits, and
you can also get universal credit. So if you remember, when I was working for Mojo, I was in full-time employment. I was working like a solid 9-6 5 days a week. I was on an alright salary, but because I had a child, they were like, you're gonna fucking skint yourself, take some money through universal credit. And every month I would basically, it was down to childcare costs, because ultimately childcare costs were pretty much the same as my wage every month. So
expensive,
totally backward system. But it's not just for people who are out of work or not able to work. There is a little bit of a kind of a grey area that people aren't aware of. And the main benefit that we have now that's eventually going to replace every other type of benefit, and it has replaced a lot of the benefits already, is universal credit.
Yeah, they changed it last year, didn't they? That universal credit was rolled out and replaced, what was it, job seekers
Allowance, or going on the dole, as we used to call it. So it replaced job seekers, it replaced something called income support, it replaced housing benefits, income-related employment and support allowance, working tax credits, child tax credits. They all got binned right off. It's now one centralised system, which is universal credit. There are certain benefits that do still sit outside of the universal credit remit. Some of them will probably get encapsulated into it at some point.
Eventually,
You won't need to know which ones are and which ones aren't for the exam, because it'll change at any time and your exam will not update with the changes.
Yeah.
So that's a bonus. But what you do need to know about universal credit is it's a means-tested benefit.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Goes off your earnings.
Correct.
So there is a qualification floor, bar, amount, give it whatever fucking name you want.
That's exactly it. There's also a savings cap. So if
Of
you
course there
have
is.
more than £16,000, and that's quite a common exam question, if you've got more than £16,000 in savings, it basically means you're ineligible for universal credit.
Right.
Because the argument is you've got a fuck ton of money in savings, you should be using that to figure
Sort yourself out.
stuff out. Yeah. So point number 1 is universal credit is the one that's encapsulating most other types of benefits, but not all. Point number 2 is it's means tested.
Yep.
So you would submit your income every single month. And point number 3 is you've got that £16,000 cap. That comes up in your CeMAP 1, 2 and 3 exam, or can come up. Not always, but it can come up.
Know that is the threshold.
Write it on a post-it note.
Stick it on the loo door.
Yeah, or on the fridge. Some
the
of my
fridge.
students send me pictures now of weird places that they put post-its. And I'm like, this tells me a lot about where you spend the most time. The benefits that don't sit under universal credit. So we've got things like carers allowance, which I know you're familiar with. The new style job seekers allowance and employment and support allowance. We're not going to dig too deep into that because we don't really need to know much about it. Disability living allowance and personal independence payments, or PIP. These are important for anyone that wants to be a mortgage advisor. So you guys, because you will see these on people's mortgage applications.
Yeah.
So with universal credit, most people who receive universal credit are probably not earning enough to buy a house. That's a general assumption. It's not always the flat
case.
example, but you'll very rarely see people applying for a mortgage who are receiving universal credit.
Yeah.
Disability living allowance and personal independence payments. These people can be in full-time work, successful jobs, but basically the government have established that they probably need a little bit of extra support financially.
Yeah.
So cases I've come across in the past when I've been dealing with mortgage applications have been people with cerebral palsy or people in wheelchairs.
Yeah.
Work full time, banging jobs.
I know that PIP is non-means tested. I think it's based on if you need additional support at home.
Yeah.
So it's based on if you need care help doing your shopping, you need to get taxis everywhere, you need carers in or someone to do your laundry, stuff like that.
Yeah.
So it's literally just, what does your day look like? Do you need extra support at home? It's regardless of what your income is.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I remember really specifically doing somebody's mortgage application and seeing that they were quite a high earner and seeing that they got personal independence payments, and I'd not seen it before. And I spoke to a colleague and I was like, is this normal? And they were like, oh yeah. It's not dependent on their income. And as it was, I think she was in a wheelchair, and she worked in central London. So to get into an office, exactly. So she said, most of that goes on transport.
Yeah.
So that's personal independence payments and disability living allowance, which we might revisit a little bit. Child benefit, though, is the thing I'm going to focus on next.
I imagine that comes up most.
It does come up very often. And there's one specific thing, it's like one for a bit of the textbook that keeps coming up for everybody. So I'm going to quote out the textbook in a second.
Ooh.
But child benefit is basically a benefit for people who care for children.
Yeah.
You don't have to be their parent, you just have to be their registered carer.
Okay.
And I think it pays up until 16 or 18, as long as they're in full-time education, it will continue to pay it. It's not a mega chunk of money. I think it's about £98 a month. Or it's a weird way that they pay it. It's like so much every week paid every fourth week, so it doesn't work per month.
Of course.
It's a completely backwards calculation. And anybody that has children can claim it. So you get a flat rate for your first child and then an additional top-up rate for every other child that you have. Right. But there is an earnings cap, and this is where it gets a bit wild. So I'm a single parent.
Yeah.
And if I earned less than £50,000 a year, I get child benefit paid to me. If I earned more than it, they'd still pay it because they don't look at my income, but I'd actually have to pay that back. But if you have two parents that are together that earn £49,000 a year each, they don't have to pay
back.
They
fall under the cap. Each of them falls under the cap.
Yeah.
Fuck.
So this is another thing that a lot of my students talk to me about. They're like, oh, did you know that it's only applicable to one person's income? So you can be a solo parent earning over £50,000 or £51,000 and pay it back. Or you can be two parents earning just under £100,000 and you don't have to pay it back. But the question that you get asked, so number one is if you're over the threshold, you need to know that you will still get it because they will not check your income.
Right.
The benefit system cannot be fucked to check your income every year. So what they'll do is, if you are earning over the limit, which at the minute is £50,000, that can change, they will basically apply an extra tax charge through self-assessment. So they will apply an extra tax onto your payroll tax payment self-assessment system. I'm not being dense when I say that, you know what I'm talking about, right?
PAYE, basically.
Yeah, exactly. And that will be the equivalent of the amount that you receive in child benefit. So you just pay it back in tax.
Jesus. Right. So they give with one hand and take with the other, standard.
Yeah, you are meant to declare it as well. Okay. I don't know whether they check. I'm not sure. I just know that you're meant to declare it if you're over the threshold. If you are, they apply an extra tax, which is declared via self-assessment, and you would pay it back.
Right.
However, if you're in employment, you don't go through self-assessment unless you've got other forms of income. So I don't know if they'd know with that. I'm not sure. You don't need to know that detail of it for your exam anyway.
Not that we're condoning tax fiddling.
Absolutely not. What's the phrase, Maria? Tax avoidance is not a crime. Tax evasion is. That's why everybody should have a really good accountant.
Yeah.
But that's child benefit. If you've got a kid, it will pay you up until they're 19, as long as they stay in full-time education. If they bunk out of school early, they get a job, you don't get paid it.
And keep your kids in education, guys.
Yeah, keep them in school, guys. So that is child benefit, all done. The next one we're going to talk about, I feel like we're firing through them. Am I talking too fast?
I don't know.
Too much coffee?
Maybe.
Oh, okay, right, hang on. Maternity pay and maternity allowance.
Yeah.
What do you know about these two things?
Pregnant people.
Correct.
For pregnant people when they can't work on account of being pregnant.
Correct. Or on account of being off with their baby.
Having been pregnant.
Yeah. This is one of the most beautifully complicated parts of the textbook ever, and I'm going to find the sentence to read it to you, and everybody can just take a quick nap while I'm doing it, just because it tickles the shit out of me every time I read it. But if you get pregnant, you may be entitled to either maternity pay or maternity allowance.
Yeah.
The difference between the two is maternity pay is for people who are in employment.
Yeah.
Maternity allowance is for self-employed people.
Right, okay.
That's point number one.
Simple.
That is pretty simple. There is, right, hang on, let me get the textbook out and read you this ridiculous sentence when I can find it. Oh, talk amongst yourselves, Maria, while I find this.
I do enough of that. I'm already the crazy lady in the village.
Oh, here we go. So, women who are become pregnant whilst employed may receive statutory maternity pay provided that they have been working for their employer continuously for 26 weeks prior to their qualifying week, which is the 15th week before the week in which their baby is due.
Jesus.
Possibly my favourite sentence out of the textbook. I sat down with a calendar because
I'm tried to work it out.
Turbo nerd, and it's basically it has to be assumed that you fell pregnant
whilst employed.
That's it. That's the rule.
So it doesn't apply if you're pregnant and then you get the job.
Exactly. So if you fall pregnant and then you get the job, so let's say you're 4 months pregnant, you go into a new job, you're actually not entitled to maternity pay at all.
Jesus.
So not a lot of women, but some women, I remember starting at Assurant, and I feel like this happened to you when we worked together.
But half of Assurant got pregnant.
But somebody had started and literally they just finished their 4 weeks of training. They were like, oh, I'm pregnant. And everybody was like, were you pregnant before you did this? Were you pregnant after? Who knows? But anyway, that's maternity pay. Maternity allowance is exactly the same, except it's for people who are self-employed, and you have to have made enough national insurance contributions to be eligible for it.
Okay.
So an example that I have is my old lash tech.
Yeah.
Beth. She was self-employed. She didn't earn enough to have to pay national insurance contributions.
Yeah.
She voluntarily paid them because she knew at some point she wanted to have a baby and she wanted to benefit from maternity allowance.
That's fair.
So that's one.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that's one way that you can kind of get around it. Maternity pay is not very much money at all. You can start claiming it so many weeks before your baby's due. So it's payable for both with maternity pay and maternity allowance.
Yeah.
It's payable for a maximum of 39 weeks. What's that in months?
I don't know. I can't do mental arithmetic.
10 months.
10 months.
So you could have a baby and then get it for 10 months. And that's why most women tend to take about 10 months or a year off work, because once you've factored in holidays, it's about a year.
About a year.
The earliest that you can start to claim it is 11 weeks before your due date. So technically, you could go off work early.
Yeah.
And a lot of women do, because it's well hard having to do anything when you're pregnant.
Yeah.
The latest date they will start paying it is the date your baby's born.
Okay.
And so when I was at Mojo, they were going through an acquisition. They were basically being bought out. And my boss had said to me, the company that are buying us out, they've got a good maternity pay package. They'll pay you full pay for the whole of your maternity leave, which is unheard of. Like, there's nobody that does that. They'll pay you full pay for all of your maternity leave. You just need to...
cross your legs.
Until the acquisition's gone through. And then I was still working when I went into labour, and I remember ringing Ed and being like, fun story.
It's not going to happen.
Yeah, and then I got, instead of getting my full pay, which is, I don't know, like £1,500 a month, I got £129 a week instead. Gutted. But that's maternity pay. It gets paid through your work, but actually your work claim it back.
Okay.
Anyway, and maternity allowance comes direct from the government as long as you've made enough national insurance contributions.
Perfect. Pretty straightforward.
We've done child benefit. Child tax credit, we've spoken about, doesn't exist anymore. It's been replaced by universal credit. And then there's other ones which I'm not going to linger on. So sick pay, statutory sick pay.
Yeah.
If you go off work sick for a period of time, you can get sick pay up to a certain length of time.
Yeah.
Most people don't realise it's a benefit because it comes from their employer, so they think it's their work that pays the sick pay, but actually...
they are getting it from the government.
Yeah, they just claim it back.
Right, okay.
So sick pay still exists. That hasn't replaced universal credit. And then we're going to talk, before we move on to pensions, which will be the last thing that we do today, we're going to talk about the difference between carer's allowance and attendance allowance. Because 100% of every single student I've ever taught gets these two confused.
Yeah.
So, Maria, you know a bit about carer's allowance.
Yeah.
What can you recall?
You have to qualify by taking care of somebody for so many hours a week and earning under a certain threshold. There is it's a means tested.
Yeah.
Sorry if anyone can hear the occasional grumbling or farting. I am currently looking after a Labrador who is...
It's a lie, it's just Maria. Just admit it.
It's our guest for today's podcast. Teddy is currently snoring asleep under a chair, so my apologies for any bodily function noises you can hear. It's the giant yellow Labrador snoring. So, yeah, carers is paid to someone. For example, I took care of my grandfather. I was paid carer's allowance per week for taking care of him for, I want to say, over 100 hours or something, what the threshold is. It's a wedge, and carer's allowance is a fucking joke for the amount
how much?
get.
Was it like 90 quid?
No, it was like, I think it was like 60.
No way. So basically, you have to evidence that it's a full-time role.
Yeah,
what
essentially.
What people have done before have been like, my mother-in-law's staying with me and she's a right fucking weapon. Can I claim carer's allowance? And the answer is no, unless you can evidence that you are full-time caring for that person. You can't claim it. And once you can evidence that you are in fact in full-time work caring for that person, they pay you £60 a week. Ish.
Yeah.
So it is a joke. The person that you're caring for doesn't have to be related to you. You just have to be able to evidence that you can care for them. That's carer's allowance if you are caring for somebody. You don't have to have made any tax or national insurance contributions to claim this, which makes sense because a lot of kids come out of school and end up caring for relatives, don't they?
Yeah.
And it's not fair to... I mean, the whole system is not fair. But the attendance allowance is different. So attendance allowance is the only benefit that is available for people that are over retirement age, with the exception of state pension, which we'll come on to.
Yeah.
So if you are over state retirement age, which changes, so I think it's 65 at the minute, it's due to go up to 67, you will not get asked what the number is in your exam because it can change, but once you are over retirement age, you can potentially claim attendance allowance if you can evidence that you need some sort of support or care, or you might need somebody to come in and help you out during the day. You might need longer term care, you might need somebody there all the time. Again, it's not very much money at all. It's certainly not going to pay for private care.
No, it doesn't. It's a very small amount.
But what you need to take away is that attendance allowance is aimed at people who need tending to.
Yeah.
It is not the same as carer's allowance because everybody mixes them up.
Yeah.
And actually, that brings us quite nicely onto state pensions.
Perfect.
What do you know about state pensions?
Not a huge amount, apart from it is always a hot button topic whenever there's elections, isn't there? Yeah. Whenever anyone mentions state pensions, basically, it's the provision you get after you retire that you supposedly have made contributions into from your paycheck. So you always get asked. They keep changing the goalposts, but I think now your employer has to match your contributions or something.
That's private pension.
That's private, so I'm wrong.
Bin that off. So state pension, you're right, it's a benefit for people in retirement, but you can only claim it if you have made enough national insurance contributions.
Again, yeah, okay.
So you'll have your payslip every month. You'll see how much tax you paid, which will be extortionate. You'll then see how much national insurance you paid, which will also be a fucking joke. And then you'll probably have a private pension as well.
Yeah.
That private pension is completely separate to the state pension.
The state pension comes from the tax side.
Yeah. The reason that we now have private pensions is because the government realised that no fucker was paying into a private pension and everybody was getting to retirement age and just being skint. Because at the minute, state pension, again, this changes every year, and I'll explain how that changes in a second, but it's about £667 a month.
Yeah.
Which, you can't live off that.
Nope.
So, with your state pension, you have to have made, number one, at least 35 years worth of national insurance contributions.
So if you're in your 30s, guys...
Start paying it now.
Start paying it now.
Yeah, exactly. It used to be 30 years. It changed recently. I think it changed in the last 2 or 3 years.
I remember them changing the goalpost. There was mass outcry.
Yeah. So, but the idea is if you've made 35 years worth of national insurance contributions, you will be entitled to a full state pension.
Yeah.
If you haven't made 35 years, but you've made some, you'll get like a tapered amount. So you will still get some. It's not like 35 years or zero.
Yeah.
But this is the reason a lot of people who live abroad, for example, my dad, still pays national insurance contributions in the UK because when he reaches retirement age, he'll still get his state benefit.
I see, okay.
So, he'll still get his state pension.
State pension, yeah.
And then there's something called the triple lock guarantee. And this is like the last thing I need you guys to pay attention to for this particular episode. And it's really funny because when you open up your internet browser, you get targeted ads.
Yeah.
My targeted ads definitely think I'm at least 75. It's like, equity release. Do you need to release some equity to leave an inheritance for loved ones? Here's some news about the triple lock guarantee. It thinks I'm 70. But basically, the triple lock guarantee is something that the government put in place to measure how much they should increase people's state pension by.
Right.
Because we have inflation, so the price of shit goes up every year. We know about this.
Cost of living crisis.
Yeah, we've spoken about this already. So the triple lock guarantee is designed to make sure that you are not receiving less than you should in comparison with the cost of things.
Right.
The reason that it's called the triple lock guarantee is because they look at 3 different factors. So the first thing that they'll look at is the average earnings for the year.
Right.
That's measured through I think it's the average weekly earnings index.
Okay.
So if we take 2023 as an example, this is a great year to talk about because I think we finished the year inflation-wise at 13%.
Right.
Nobody got a 13% pay rise last year. Nobody.
No one.
So if we're looking at earnings, that's not the one. Because point number 2 that they will consider is how much did inflation go up by?
Yeah.
So we know that wages did not go up last year by 13%. Inflation did go up by 13%. Yeah. The third thing that they will consider is our inflation target, which is what, Maria?
2%?
Correct. Well, yes. Ding, 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 ding. 2%. So what they'll do is the government will go, okay, what was the average earnings for last year? What was the rate of inflation for last year?
Yeah.
And then they'll take 2.5%. If earnings are dead low, so they've not gone up 2.5%, and inflation has not gone up 2.5%, they have to take the highest one.
Yeah.
So it would go up by 2.5%.
Yeah.
Last year, they looked at the 3, so they looked at earnings, they looked at inflation, and they looked at 2.5%.
Yeah.
Which one was the highest?
13.
The 13%. So everybody's state pension went up 13% last year.
Ooh!
That's how they work it out. And actually, it's a pretty fair way of calculating it.
Yeah.
Because it means that really nobody misses out. You get the point.
Yeah. It's the fairest way they've come up with thus far.
Exactly. And that's it for this topic.
Oh.
I know, it's just a short and sweet one.
Yeah, it wasn't as painful as you made it out to be.
Oh, no, but it was pretty boring. And I can only apologise for that, but hey, you tuned in, you listened to it.
You have all chosen
to be here. Yeah, nobody's been pinned down and forced to listen to this. Speaking of being forced to listen to this,
Ooh.
I was just gonna say, if you guys can, subscribe, hit the follow button. People keep telling me they can't find this on Apple Music, which is something I need to figure out. But if you're listening to this on Spotify, especially, there's a little bell button at the top of your screen on your phone. If you press the bell button, steady. What it means is that you'll get notified when we get an episode, and your episodes will automatically download. So even if you decide you are absolutely fucking sick of listening to us, we still get the support in the form of downloads, and that makes a huge difference. Because
Massive.
the more people engage with it, the more people download it, the more cool stuff we can do. These episodes come out usually every week. If you don't know what I do, we usually do this at the start.
Where have you been?
Yeah, where have you been? Just go to futureinfinance.co.uk and I can help you get CeMAP qualified.
That's it.
My courses for the rest of this year are booking up. My course dates for next year will be available at some point later this month because I've already got people asking about that.
Cool.
And I got some pretty exciting things coming up with different podcast episodes, which Maria, I haven't even spoken to you about yet. So
I'm in the dark.
Stay tuned for that one. But I think that's it for this week. Thank you again so much for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Leave us a 5-star review. Tell us how much you love us on wherever you can, and tell your friends.
Cue outro music.